because properties now are digital, there's basically zero resale value, which is pretty insane given the amount of money that we spend in the game, like post buying the game, right? And so I think Web3 gaming is like, Web3 is also no longer about just NFTs. Because I think that's where we kind of got introduced with gaming, like brands getting into the game through NFTs, whatever. I think now we're thinking about, it's leveraging the technology to actually have, property ownership, right? And kind of getting access to these respective in-game assets, being able to own them because they are rare, they're unique, and with the future having interoperability, right? We're talking about, using armors that you've gotten from like Kratos and God of War, which is one publisher, and playing that on Assassin's Creed, right? Like with Ubisoft, like it's the creativity that you can have with that. To me, it's just like, yeah, this is cool. So I think this is what got me excited with being able to leverage that technology, which is why I'm much more keen of not like at some point we're not going to call it a Web3 game. It's just going to be like gaming and just like leveraging the technology for it. I believe that in the very near future, um, Africa is going to hold the largest STEM workforce in the world. That's a lot. So, given that, and that's a big if, right? But I really do believe, because the numbers are kind of showing that, it is in our absolute interest to empower that audience the best we possibly can. Because if not, the next best thing, it's outside of this continent. And we don't want that to happen.
Web3 gaming is an emerging type of gaming experience that leverages blockchain and NFTs to create decentralized games with in-game items that are interoperable with other games and are owned by the players themselves. In this episode of Emerging Voices, I interviewed Kevin Imani, CEO and founder of Spaceport, a Web3 gaming custody platform. Kevin is also founder and CEO of Sankore 2.0, a blockchain community that aims to educate and nurture individuals to become world-class blockchain developers and excel blockchain innovation and applications in Africa. Before Kevin became an international technology leader, he was a student at Oxford where he received a master's in African studies. During our conversation, we discussed why Kevin is bullish on Web3 gaming, how Spaceport is trying to simplify the onboarding experience for gamers to Web3, why Spaceport is focusing on the global south, blockchain in Africa, and more. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. And now, on to the show. For anyone that looks at your LinkedIn, they're going to see someone with an impressive background and track record of starting and investing in businesses. We don't have time to talk about all your accomplishments, but let's talk about two of them, Spaceport and your views on Web3 gaming, and Sankore 2.0 and how it's been instrumental for crypto adoption in Greater Africa. But before we talk about all this, let's talk about you, Kevin, and your interesting story from acting to academia to Africa to be a blockchain leader and entrepreneur. What is your story that led you from the stage to Oxford and then Kenya?
Talking to really cool people that have different ideas, learning about opportunities, and also kind of like staying true to myself, right? So I've had really cool friends that kind of introduced me to crypto back in 2015. They were sort of trading. I kid you not, John, I did not know what I was doing. I thought I was like, at the time, like Ethereum was really popular, and Bitcoin. I don't know what Bitcoin was at the time, but like, yeah, I was kind of dib dabbling on it. And then kind of kept it on the side. I love I guess this philosophical conception of decentralization and what that potentially can mean on a society and a nation and that sort of stuff. But yeah, and I think honestly, long story short, 4 or 5 years later, same friend, reached out and he was like, "Hey, I'm doing some cool work with some foundations, and they're looking to expand in like different regions." and Africa was in the conversation, and I thought about you. I talked to you about them. They got excited. They want to meet you. You want to get on a call with them? And I was like, dude, like I'm in school, bro. Like I'm writing about post-colonial like nationalism. Like I don't really, you know what I mean? And yeah, and then essentially I got really interested into it, and one thing led to another. Got a huge opportunity to move to Africa, specifically in Kenya, to yeah, work with foundations there and set up regional communities, do a whole bunch of different things. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much how I got into the space.
I mean, that's a great story. When you say, "Oh, I didn't know anything," I mean, you have to start somewhere. And in 2015, I mean, it's still a relatively nascent technology today, blockchain, and in the way it's applied today, and cryptocurrencies as well. So you have to start somewhere. And entering a frontier industry and market, speaks to, the path, the quick path, one may say, from academia to becoming a leader. So it's quite commendable to dive into something new, and from studying post-colonial nationalism in Africa to this new technology and its institutionalization. It's quite an amazing story. Now, recently you made an announcement on LinkedIn and debuted your newest startup called Spaceport. For the uninitiated, what is Spaceport?
Spaceport essentially is like your browser type of experience that operates. It's basically your browser that operates like a marketplace for dApps and accessing dApps way more easily. Your favorite dApps as well, and we're going to be focusing on blockchain, specifically gaming verticals and Web3 gaming as well.
And who is part of the team with you at Spaceport, and what are their backgrounds?
So part of the team right now, so we've been working with, so basically these are some of the people that I've worked on earlier on in the days before Sankore 2.0. So essentially these are people that I've, like Lee, for example, he's, my co-founder. He's been making his kids like famous on YouTube. They've had over 1 billion views, unboxing toys and kind of like testing them out. Alina, which actually is another product that we worked on called Open Source Protocol, which is an on-chain carbon credit platform. And so she's been working with the team and myself as a director, and sort of like the tech behind it. And so the team that basically like I've got into that crypto space. And so yeah, Lee, Alina, and then we got 3 other developers, which are part of Alina's team as well. So yeah, this is a relatively lean team, so we wanted to keep it lean. So that's the team that we have for Spaceport.
Now, you're pretty bullish on Web3 gaming, and you're a bit of a gamer yourself. For anyone that is unfamiliar with Web3 gaming, what is Web3 gaming, and why are you bullish on the growth of this intersection of blockchain and video games?
Yeah, that's a good question, John. So gaming in general, and I think at some point we're gonna stop calling it Web3 gaming. It's just gonna be gaming because at the end of the day, you're not gonna feel or sense any Web3 interfaces. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit, but yeah, I mean, essentially, it's kind of so what for me, what got me really interested in Web3 gaming as a gamer, there's about $150 billion, spent every year on in-game assets, right? And we're not talking about the ability of playing, Call of Duty or Candy Crush on your mobile phone or whatever. We're talking about buying outfits and costumes and skins on your weapons, right? Or armor or gear, right? Look at Fortnite, for example, like tons of brands, are making it available to buy Gucci Fortnite armor, which is pretty cool. But the thing that stood out to me is that there's about $0 actually can be sold from that, right? So this resale is basically worth nothing. And you look at, for example, Robbie, the co-founder of Mutable, he mentioned as well in terms of like, that because property is now a digital, there's basically zero resale value, which is pretty insane given the amount of money that we spend in the game, like post buying the game, right? And so I think Web3 gaming is like, Web3 is also no longer about just NFTs. Because I think that's where we kind of got introduced with gaming, like brands getting into the game through NFTs, whatever. I think now we're thinking about, it's leveraging the technology to actually have, property ownership, right? And kind of getting access to these respective in-game assets, being able to own them because they are rare, they're unique, and with the future having interoperability, right? We're talking about, using armors that you've gotten from like Kratos and God of War, which is one publisher, and playing that on Assassin's Creed, right? Like with Ubisoft, like it's the creativity that you can have with that to me is just like, yeah, this is cool. So I think this is what got me excited with being able to leverage that technology, which is why I'm much more keen of not like at some point we're not going to call it a Web3 game. It's just going to be like gaming and just like leveraging the technology for it.
And Spaceport is a novel custody platform that envisions a world where gamers immerse themselves in a Web3 experience. What is Spaceport trying to solve?
Essentially, the specific problem that we identified, and there's a lot of studies being done about this. So, for example, Blockchain Gaming Alliance, which actually one of our advisors, Yasmina Kazitani, she's a senior advisor, senior manager there. So there's a lot of study being done about like how one of the biggest challenges for gamers to get into the space is accessibility, right? And the onboarding experience. So our premise to say like, look, Web3 interfaces can't be at the foreground of players' initial experience, right? Because today you have to go through all kinds of different gymnastics to literally play a game with actually the fact knowing that the gamer does not necessarily care about the game yet, right? I mean, you gotta have to set up your central exchange, like set up your account on a central exchange to buy tokens. You gotta, set up, essentially connect your bank account on there. You gotta have to, send a token to a wallet. So we use MetaMask, for example. Then you have to bridge a new chain. Then you have to set up your custom RPC network, and that is just one wallet that you use to access that respective game on that respective ecosystem. But you may be playing other games on other ecosystems, so you have to get another wallet and do the exact same, process, and say you play three different games, God forbid, on three different networks, you have to operate that three different types of wallets with using MetaMask, making sure that you got all your seed phrases secure somewhere. And you're like, dude, I just want to play the game, bro. I don't even care about the game like that. Like my friend talked to me about this game that's really cool called whatever, Livium, whatever, and I have to go do all this thing. This is a lot, right? So I'm saying basically the team were like, look, guys, there's a lot of competing forces out there, right? You have your Netflix, your HBO, you got your mobile phone, right? Console. They all are competing forces for your time as a player. And so the more friction you can reduce, the more odds you increase for the players to play your game, right? And so the experience essentially, for the user has to be frictionless. We have to reduce as much friction as possible. And that is what we want to do. We technically want to remove the Web3 interfaces for the player's experience so that they don't even feel like it's Web3. They just can play their games immediately. Given why we have a cross-chain kind of platform that's a custodial provider where you don't have to create multiple different accounts on multiple different ecosystems. You create one account, and that's the only account you have to create forever and access different ecosystems, different networks, on the platform, and then play the game on the platform as well, given why it's a marketplace as well.
Okay, so Spaceport proposes being a custodial wallet, not a non-custodial wallet. For people deep in crypto, one of the first things they may say to someone new to crypto is not your keys, not your coins, meaning you need to be in control of your crypto because there is no recourse if you lose your tokens either because of a hack or a rug pull on a custodial platform or an exchange. However, that is also the case for non-custodial wallets. You lose your keys, you get hacked, you send funds to a wrong payment address. There's no customer service to help a user, as opposed to a fully regulated custodial wallet provider or exchange. Nevertheless, how do you anticipate the market responding to Spaceport's custody model?
Essentially, Spaceport targets novel users, so not crypto savvy users, which in my experience in the last 2.5 years, novel users are much more, and specifically in regions in the global south. which is also important to mention. I think we'll talk about a little bit in terms of like which region we're sort of targeting and why. But yeah, so the region and because the target audience that we are focusing on are much more open to security and trust insofar as being able to, rely on a platform that just takes care of everything for them. And in 2 or 3 clicks, or the class 9 seconds to play, narrative is just present. And so I think the self-custodial component, or, I guess, you keeping your own key seed phrases and whatnot. Um, it's a narrative that plays along or is aligned with some of the promises, the premises of Web3. I think it's a pretty secluded, small kind of market because of the fact that, these are the ones who've kind of been groomed and been familiarized with the space. But those people that do not care about the game yet, or generally speaking, the dApp, they're more familiar with the traditional way of working, so far as, dude, I just want to create the account and that's it. Like just one account, one password, maybe your security kind of like, message on the email and then accessing it. So I think the response for the target that we're going to be focusing on is going to be more so far as, can they find the application that they love and that they're really excited about that one friend that they talked with the other night on it, can they find it on there, and how easy it is to access it. I think that's going to be our heavy lifting and on our side. I think over time, we definitely are providing a hybrid model insofar as providing also custodial on the platform. So that's going to be available for those who really want to, kind of benefit and not jeopardize the self-custody experience that they know.
I mean, I get that. I mean, for, as you described, novel users, they may be new to crypto, they may be new to all these concepts. And to your point, they just want to play the game, man. Like they could come learn things later. Let's get to game and fun, and this is a way we can do it. And then in process, you can learn new terms. So I think for me is I'm not a hardcore gamer, but I'm a little bit of a gamer, and I could understand that experience that you're describing about the users you're targeting. And let's now talk about those markets. You described the markets in the global south. Which markets will Spaceport be launching in first? And what is it about those markets that attracts you and your team?
Simply, we've wanted already to focus on, sort of the global south, and so far as markets that, have basically, me being based in Africa, right? Like there's a specific consensus, or like at least different types of problems that people want to, the people experiencing here. And I think part of the reason is because also like the mobile penetration that we've experienced here is pretty significant. So mobile gaming is really picking up a lot. And I'm not even talking about play to earn, because that's a different segment of players. I think there's a very, very small market equally as well, because most people just play for fun and not to make money. I've never played to make money. So I think the market specific that we're focusing on, for example, in Africa, we're going to be focusing on Kenya and South Africa and Nigeria, because these are markets insofar as the litigation and the licenses that we need to operate in those jurisdictions are much more friendly, which is really important, because essentially we're going to be, we're going to provide a custodial platform. So we're going to hold people's assets operating such as an FSP. So there's a couple of, legal hurdles that we need to overcome. So these are the markets that were more friendly for us so far. And so these are also markets where we have partners and, people that we worked with that can open up some, I guess, target specific markets there and targeted audiences there as well. So we kind of played also on our relationships, on low-hanging fruits. My respective relationship as well with working with foundations and blockchain foundations as well. And then Southeast Asia is another significant, target audience. As you know, I mean, there's a massive gaming community there. So if Thailand, for example, Thailand actually has one of the highest average revenue per user, up to $200. So there's about 32 million gamers in the country. So it's pretty a lot. It's a lot. And so these, Thailand, for example, Philippines, Vietnam, these are also partners that these are countries where we have partners, where we also can have access to esports organizations, and other publishers as well that are basically are operating as, your respective game publishers. So these are the countries right now that we have: Philippines, South Africa, Vietnam, Thailand, Kenya, Nigeria. And so we're sort of playing, kind of casting the net as wide as we can in those respective regions to see which ones picks up first, because it's always really hard to predict, that initial growth at first. So yeah, that's at least now the selected countries that we have, for just more for strategic reasons.
Now, what stood out to me with what you just said is these markets offer a friendlier regulatory environment. It's easier for a business to operate in that's financial services related. What kind of regulatory requirements do you and your team need to abide by? And what does adhering to regulatory requirements actually look like in practice?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's to be very honest with you, John, it's like it's an ongoing research. We literally are finding things out as we go, practically almost every week. Because essentially, you're always trying to find out first, what is the framework, that the state or the government is positioning crypto assets, crypto activity, in a legislative way. Like whatever that looks like, try to find where it fits. Like this is what we say about that, right? However gray it may be, right? You just need to know where's the position, because this is why we're not going to be in countries where like some country be like, look, any crypto activity, we technically ban that, right? As opposed to, it's not legal, but it's also not illegal. Or you could have a more, kind of, more advanced position of saying like, look, we're actually having conversation with innovators because we want to reduce the gap between, stop playing catch up in that sense, right? We really want to understand what it is. So you have those countries who really want to understand and then essentially focus more on consumer protection as opposed to just banning stuff outright because they don't get it. So finding first that framework is really important, which can be cumbersome. It can take time as well. But luckily we managed to do it in the country that we have selected. And then once you know, understand the framework, it's important to see where do you fit in that, right? Who are you, and how are you going to be recognized by them? Essentially, what do your operations look like in the eyes of the government? And then hopefully if they have already identified in crypto asset management or digital asset management or virtual asset management, in their respective framework, then it's easy. Then okay, cool, this is what I got to do. And then they mentioned about the fact that there's a specific license that you need to have in order to operate legally. And since just basically what that means is just holding people's assets legally, right? So which means that now you have to have had that license set up, essentially just what you have to pay for. By paying that, it automatically obliges you to have an entity in the country, essentially for tax purposes, to be fair. And then essentially, what you need to do on your end is to make sure that you have insurance for the assets that you hold for the customers, which either is banking partners or film backstop, that you can have. So these are the three steps essentially to operate as an FSB, for virtual digital asset management platform in those countries. I know it's a lot, it's a bit cumbersome, but it's one of those things where like, this is why people don't like custody because they don't want that, right? They want to avoid all of that. They like, dude, I don't care. I just want to know this is my non-custodial platform. This is the tech stack. We're going to launch that and go for it. But our premise is to say like, look, growth, and we're talking about significant growth, has historically come through custody. We know that. The only reason why people don't like custody is because people have messed up in the past, right? And this is just a classic thing that just happens. It's not the tech, it's just bad people, period. Right? Like it's just people mismanaging funds because of selfishness and greed and all that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, it has provided huge, humongous growth. And I think our premise is say, like, look, if we can get those licenses in the global south. Because one of my missions and my biggest beliefs of why I'm doing this is because I'm a strong believer that the global south is going to be the tipping point of mass adoption for Web3, for us to see the promises of Web3. But for that, people need a easier experience. The experience today is bad, and we're not going to get there with what we have today. Um, so yeah, I guess that's my that's a little bit of my thoughts on that.
I mean, that's a lot on your plate. It sounds very cumbersome for any entrepreneur, but on the flip side, I mean, the learning curve is steep, but once you learn it, that knowledge is invaluable for whatever you may do in the future, as well as any kind of advice and feedback that you may give to people coming to you. I mean, this is very unique knowledge, and there's a lot of value in going through that process. Let's look ahead to 2024. What's next for Spaceport's timeline, and what can we expect in the new year?
Now we are stacking up a pipeline with partnerships and basically also just agreements with different foundations and specifically games and dApps that are going to be listed on Spaceport. So I can't yet talk about some of the products, but we have really, really cool games that have not even been launched yet that are looking to be, basically get listed on Spaceport. And also foundations, because essentially foundations are, important, ecosystems of support for, any applications that are being built on their network, not just for finances, but also technical support. So really working hands in hands with them, essentially, because this is an opportunity for them also to have, basically larger adoption, essentially, and more users through Spaceport. So working with foundations, games to get listed. So these are going to be heavy lifting sort of business development on our side. So for coming year, which is going to be really exciting. And then we're also going to be opening up the round. Essentially, we're going to be raising for Spaceport. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And I think it's going to be really exciting just to kind of see, people's interest and how fast we can raise for it to get it off the ground and really start building, and to have the full sort of products out for the market. So hopefully by, not to say the hard deadlines, but I definitely want to see, but like, Q3 next year, we'll be able to have full products launched out, which I'm incredibly excited about to see in the market. So yeah, that's essentially our the things that I'm looking forward for next year.
Now let's talk about Web3 gaming in general. You touched on this a little bit at the beginning. When I think about the case for Web3 gaming and why Web3 game entrepreneurs are bullish on Web3 gaming, the people I've spoken to are hardcore online gamers, people that grew up and played games like Diablo Online, League of Legends, World of Warcraft, and they talk about in-game items, the use of in-game virtual currency, at times even making a deal with someone to sell an in-game item for fiat. But above all, this conviction that the items belong to them, regardless of any legal argument made by the game makers, because of the time and work spent to earn items that are valuable in the games. Therefore, the idea and notion of blockchain interoperability, decentralization, all for the actual ownership of in-game items may make a lot of sense to hardcore gamers. However, for the average player that may play a little bit online, lose a lot because everyone is better than them, this is an experience I can relate to, players that may be more casual gamers. How do you make the case, Kevin, that they should not only be paying attention to Web3 gaming, but even embrace the idea of Web3 gaming and start playing Web3 games?
I can relate to that too, by the way, because there's some that are incredibly good. And yeah, which is why we have esports organizations and they're technically athletes. And they got a small salary to play games. We feel like, why am I playing against these people? Yeah, so I this is a great question again, and I think there's a lot of there's some work that we need to do in communicating the value of how we are leveraging the technology. I think we haven't done a good job on that yet. And I mean, granted, because it's still called Web3 games, it's still kind of like a bit of a, fear-mongering place to be. It's a bit complicated, like I mentioned, just the gymnastics to access the game and play. So we haven't done a good job on that. And I think we're still crafting and pushing that narrative through. I mean, despite the fact, I mean, you talked about, true ownership, um, and leveraging that is pretty novel. And it's pretty exciting to be able to have true ownership. And I think it's aligned with the promises of Web3, right? And having that sort of economy. Um, I think games today, or at least game publishers and game developers are trying to make it more easier and seamless for those who are familiar with games. And for example, Arc 8, right? Like they're basically bringing back the old school traditional games that people know, but on the back end, it's fully run on a blockchain. And now the tokens that you may have, or the rewards that you may have, is in a digital asset form, and then it contains so much more value, and it's yours forever on your wallet, right? And so they're trying to play with novel concept, but also very familiar experiences that people know. And I think there's constant dynamic and dialogue between both. And I think the spokespersons or people like myself who try to like promote that industry, we're trying to simplify that dialogue, and not just like, wow, give it to you, like this is what it is. Like, yeah, it's confusing. I don't really get it. So yeah, there's not a great answer to it, but yeah, the classics ones for sure, right? Ownership is huge. Cross-platform play, such as interruptibility, that's the complicated word. I think we need to change that as well. Like, it's what the heck is interruptibility, bro? Like, it's, you know what I mean? It's one of those things, again, we got to re-simplify it. It's just like your ability to transfer digital goods, armor, weapons, outfits, whatever, in another game. That's it. Stop right there. That's all. That's exactly what interruptibility essentially is. Of course, it's much more in the back end of it, but that's what the gamer wants to see. It's like, oh, I can use this weapon on that game, right? Um, so that is one thing that I think is going to make it more popular. And we've seen a lot of like Avax, for example, they're doing that really strongly. Solana doing that really strongly. I guess maybe we'll talk more about some of the different ecosystems that are playing or front runners in that sector. And also community, right? Like the same way you have foundations and networks and ecosystems, they have the community, and the community can operate not only just as a DAO, what they say actually matters. And that contribution towards the development of the network matters a lot, right? We've seen that in the past with Reddit, right? In terms of like how people are reactive onto it, and then perhaps people, developers are really looking at people's feedbacks and user tests and that sort of stuff. But community activation and community feedback is huge, because they have ownership as well. That's the thing about Web3, which is really cool. So the community can actively contribute in the development of the games, of the ecosystem, of the network. And these are the things that we don't know, we don't see, right? Today, our regular games don't provide that, right? I have no say in how Call of Duty should be run, and why do we have these respective maps. They don't, I can't say anything about. I mean, yeah, I can post about it on Twitter, but nobody cares. So these are the few things that I think are, you know, opportunities for us to embrace Web3 games, right? Ownership, um, community contribution, but also interruptibility. But we need to do better on communicating those ideas.
What are some of the Web3 games today that you're following and playing that are some of the more popular ones that people should check out?
Right now, those that I'm following, there's three that I'm following relatively closely. One is Livium. It's a pretty awesome explorative world where they've managed to have three games in one. I don't know how to do it, but it's pretty cool. So you have an arena, you have an actual virtual world as well, and battleground. And so like you can hop into different games. And again, there's actually like a cross play like so basically interactability, within a game, right? So like you can use different items and different goods through different games and collect them and then upgrade stuff. So, and the graphics are phenomenal. I would definitely, I'm not sponsored by them yet, but I would definitely like check out Elysium. It's pretty cool. One game that I'm also following is Shrapnel. The team is incredibly experienced. Some of these guys have over 25 years of experience in the gaming scene. So yeah, they're also really good entrepreneurs, and I think this could potentially become one of the first AAA star first-person shooter games on Web3. Um, Again, graphics is amazing, and so that's really cool. It's very exploitative as well. And another game that I'm almost following is Star Atlas. In fact, Star Atlas, I believe, is some of the founders of Star Atlas have had at the time when they launched it from the former game, I think it's called Sega. They had more transaction than an entire Polygon ecosystem in a day. So they've done really, really well. So these are some of the games that I've kind of looked into, and there's also better versions, so you can start playing with them, specifically Livium as well. So yeah, I've kind of been looking into it. But then games that I've kind of just been playing, I'm a bit more of an old school Steam player. And I think this is maybe the leverage as well because I played Web 2, right? And then I understand Web 2 gamers. So Counter-Strike, big fan on Steam. I've been playing that for a while. And yeah, and then just do regular first person shooter games as well. So COD as well. It's Call of Duty, big fan. Assassin's Creed, God of War. These are the games. So I also I'm not just playing Web3. I think it's cool, but my love right now is just the explorative rules of like the games that I know and that I love playing.
I want to talk about Axie Infinity for a moment because Axie Infinity was the game that brought people's attention to Web3 gaming in general. However, as fast as it became popular, that popularity hasn't been sustained. This is the classic blockchain and crypto gold rush story. How do you feel about this, Kevin? And how does this impact your greater vision for Web3 gaming and Spaceport's business vision?
It's always an opportunity for us to understand and see, opportunities and have early adopters. There's a saying that says it's better to have 100 people that love you than a million that kind of like you. Axie Infinity did that. They've had their 100 people that loved what Web3 game can provide. And yeah, maybe there was, a couple of million people just like interested, but there's still 100 people that love this, and they essentially would talk about it with their friends, and they will kind of be almost kind of like your ambassadors, right? Like they'll communicate that experience that they've had because I'm happy to see my friend happy with this experience, and I maybe want to try as well. And I think that is a good and a positive feedback from the message that we want to communicate about the promises of Web3. So I think about it a little bit more optimistically. Yes, there is a little bit of work insofar as, the sustainability component of it. I think partnering with more bigger players in the space that can provide you, a bigger market share, stay, more kind of staying capacity and kind of lasting a bit longer is important. So I think this is good. Diversification of it as well. I think it kind of targets new markets, new players, people who may not even been playing games before. And I think, yeah, I think I look at it more in terms of like, okay, are we pushing towards a more positive trend? And essentially, this is providing a pathway for other games and other ecosystems to sort of walk onto that. And so we need players, we need companies as such. So I think that's part of innovation, man. I think it's a classic sort of cycle that we go through essentially.
Well, we're approaching the end of our conversation. Let's pivot briefly to talk about Sankore 2.0 and blockchain in Africa. Kevin, what is the origin story of Sankore 2.0 and what is its association with the near blockchain?
The original story is actually a historical narrative. And it's funny because Sankore 2.0 is one of my first kind of project or company that I kind of came working in. That's how I sort of managed to build a bit of a brand. Um, I love history, right? And I'm a big fan of history in the continent of Africa. So I love the specific story about the one of the first universities in the world, which is founded in Mali, around the 15th century. And what's special about this place, they've had an incredible standard of quality of education, and also just production, right? So insofar as mathematics and physics and chemistry and all the STEM fields as well, but also literature. Given I have a, I majored also in philosophy, so I'm a big fan of literature as well. I fell in love with that story, and I was like, dude, like, this is significant, right? This is cool to know. It was run by this king called King Mansa Musa, one of the wealthiest families to ever live. And I was like, if I wanted to do it related to innovative technology and perhaps also education, but also kind of being a thought leader, and bringing people into believing of kind of seeing themselves as leaders themselves, right, and as role models. I'd want to do it with a narrative that stems really deeply into our story, into our history, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Some of the values there are really important. So that's why I call it Sankore 2.0. And essentially, I was like, look, I want to build role models, right? I want African the young African demographic to be part of, the sitting tables and to be part of innovative technologies and being part of these conversations and build and not just assume, right? Part of the development as well. And I think I wanted to kind of brighten that place, right? That voice a little bit. So the Near Foundation was basically the first ecosystem that took a bet on a young kid from Oxford who had a dream, and said, "Yeah, I think this kid is onto something. I don't know what it is, but he's onto something." So it's literally just that, man. They took a bet on a kid, and essentially that bet was for them to being able to get access to the African market or the African markets and plural at large. And that's what Sankore 2.0 did. And so we've always been, kind of interested in seeing how far we can push that forward. And so we've been doing that. Essentially, that's the origin story of Sankore 2.0.
And what is the vision for you and Sankore, and what have been its biggest accomplishments that you're most proud of?
The vision of Sankore 2.0, to be very honest with you, John, has always been to be able to operate almost um as a closely related to, so it operates right now as a foundation, because we were allocating capital, such as kind of a fund, of course, for no equity. But I've always liked that component, right? Not just as a foundation, but also provide getting to the private sector and also to establish a fund-like presence. And of course, that's the far future and the kind of what I see it for the company. Um, but the largest accomplishments is that we have been able to allocate over $1 million into grants, to pre-seed startup projects across the continent, which I'm incredibly proud of. So, and then we've won a couple of awards as well, as being one of the best sort of real communities on Web3 in Africa. I also kind of like work with foundations, and being able to also kind of been invited in, all the four corners of the continent, right? And this is what I love in terms of also the validation of it, right? I needed to go to West Africa and also to go to the French-speaking countries because I'm native in French, so I wanted to also validate there because everyone was so Anglo-Saxon. And I'm like, okay, what about Togo, Benin, Cameroon, Senegal? Like, we never talk about these countries and sort of being at the front runners and maybe having hackathons and boot camps or whatever. And that was one of the priorities that I have. So having market validation there was big. Tunis as well, up north, South Africa, Zambia, Kenya, Kigali, Rwanda. So like these places have been important for us. So we've been invited to also be part of demo days. We also have a network of different incubators, so that we can also kind of send them to different incubators depending on the stage that they are at, and then essentially give them access to funding to either ecosystems like the Name Foundation or other players that want to benefit from that portfolio.
Who are some of the projects that you funded and incubated? What do they do and how are they doing today?
One of the projects is that I'm actually really proud of. It's called Utu, which is essentially an AI sort of platform that allows for different review systems to kind of be aggregated from different platforms, like services. So, for example, if you want to get into an Uber, you get a chance to choose who your driver is. But with Utu, you'll be able to see amongst your friends who's taken that driver and get more, essentially like remove the trust component. Now you actually have a trusted driver. But me as it's fine. But say, for example, you're a young lady coming from dinner with your friends at night and it's late, you may not be trusting any driver that comes in, you know what I mean, and picks you up, right? So they've done a really good job on that, also raised off of that. So I'm really proud of that. Gateway is another project as well based in Nigeria. They have basically gamified education of different kind of like educational platform. So like a kind of consortium of different, think about like a Udemy, but in a gamified experience, which is really cool. So they've built that. They've also been part of the different incubator programs. Um, so yeah, so these are the few kind of projects that we've really been, excited about. Another project we've also kind of sponsored, UABA, which is United African Blockchain Association, based in Zambia, in Lusaka. And they've been really heavy on education, right? Insofar as going to vulnerable communities, rural communities as well, and tokenizing education insofar as kind of like giving them teachings and also kind of get people to not only learn, but also kind of find ways to onboard them into crypto, get them banked as well, giving them the wallets, showing them how it works, and then kind of creating an ecosystem. Amongst different kind of like local boutiques. Um, you guys can look it up as well. It's called Yuaba. So these are it's a variety of community work, but also education and AI tech tools for African in Africa. So this is kind of things that we've been interested in looking at.
Now, blockchain in its most basic definition is just a database. And the two main use case pillars are payments and identity. And I've asked a similar question to other African-based guests I've had on the podcast. Why do you think, Kevin, blockchain is important to Africa? And the African people that are excited about blockchain, why are they excited?
For probably the first time in a very long time, and I'll probably say like in the last 8 years, probably. You essentially, if you look at it that way, if you can, your mom and your dad no longer have to be running either monopolies or part of the elite government for you to be successful in however you want to define success. And that's how we have identified successful, genuine success and making it, and how we view leaders. You either have to be in the government, right? Or, you know, parents that, have run monopolies, one or the other. Get you also a ticket to go and study abroad, which is a vast majority of what people want to do because it costs a lot of money and you need connection, right? Um, and what blockchain basically provides is with a digital identity, it practically does not matter what your background is. It doesn't matter, where you're from. It doesn't matter where you grew up, right? All you get is a digital identity, and from that, literally get access to an ecosystem, an ecosystems in plural, where you have an ability to reinvent yourself across the board. This is really innovative. This is really mind-boggling, right? You can literally be a kid in Addis and having access to your mobile as a phone, right? And top up with your mobile money or whatever, and then access to the online ecosystem or Polygon ecosystem, and literally start contributing there, getting access to gig economy, do some work there, getting paid in stables, off-ramping there, finding different ways to kind of like getting access to it and just grow into that. People will value whoever that individual is from a digital perspective, because that's your digital identity that is belongs to you. No one can tamper it, no one can hack it, no one can, you know what I mean? It's immutable, so it's just yours, it can't change forever. And everything you've done, everything you've accomplished is there forever, right? It's even better than a CV that you can possibly think of, right? And I think that concept is kind of what made me fall in love with it, because I was like, dude, this could be an opportunity of a lifetime, right? And to show people the opportunities, the ability that they can do with that, right? Not just in education, but also in agriculture, right? But also in supply chain management, but also in the gig economy sector, but also for creatives and artists. And there's so much it can do. And I think that is why I think we fell in love with it. And I think why people are essentially going to also kind of see themselves with that and project themselves in the future of what they can become.
Kevin, last question. With this grand vision that you've just described and have in mind, what is your message to African leaders across the continent regarding why they should prioritize fostering blockchain as a subsect of their tech sectors and developing regulatory frameworks to make a market?
I believe that in the very near future, um, Africa is going to hold the largest STEM workforce in the world. That's a lot. So, given that, and that's a big if, right? But I really do believe, because the numbers are kind of showing that, it is in our absolute interest to empower that audience the best we possibly can. Because if not, the next best thing, it's outside of this continent. And we don't want that to happen. That's literally what I would tell them.
Kevin, before we go, how could people get in touch with you and support Spaceport and Sankore 2.0?
Get access to the Sankore 2.0 so Twitter page, that it's Sankore 2-0 Twitter. So we can get on that. I'm sure we get the handles on the description there as well. Also the Spaceport Twitter page was going to come up soon with really cool announcements. Definitely would say get onto that. And honestly, these are the two biggest platforms. Anything related to community activation that we do in different regions in Africa is going to be Sankore 2.0. Anything related to gaming, it's going to be Spaceport. So these are the kind of two sectors that you get to see and kind of keep updated.
And you're pretty active on LinkedIn. How can people get in touch with you, Kevin? Is LinkedIn the best way? Twitter? What is your preferred mode?
Yeah, so with me, honestly, the best way I would say just LinkedIn. I think it's pretty easy. Kevin Imani, Imani last name. And that's where you kind of see everything as well. So the stuff that I'm working on, thinking about, also kind of interact with a few people that are on it as well, to kind of get their feedback. So you can always reach out to me on Twitter and sorry, LinkedIn.
Kevin, thank you very much for being a guest on the show and sharing your insights and perspectives. Be sure to follow Kevin to stay up to date on Spaceport, Sankore 2.0, and his thought leadership on Web3 gaming and blockchain in Africa. That does it for today's episode of Emerging Voices, an EmergingCrypto.io podcast. I'm John Lira. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.